28 березня продовжую роботу медіа-центру України. Мене звати Світлана Чепуренко. Зараз говоримо про безпеку людей під час ворожих атак, про те, як діяти в випадку влучань, пожеж і під час евакуації. З нами сьогодні Анатолій Шкарбута, департамент запобігання надзвичайним ситуаціям апарату ДСНС України, і Олександр Khorunzhyi, пресофіцер ДСНС України. Вітаю вас. Перш ніж перейдемо до розмови про певні правила і алгоритми, про те, як діяти в надзвичайних ситуаціях, хочу спершу, пане Олександре, дізнатися, як минула остання доба, можливо, останній тиждень, якою є безпекова ситуація і як часто були залучені представники ДСНС.
На жаль, констатую, що дуже часто залучаються працівники ДСНС до ліквідації російських обстрілів. Приведу статистику. Менше ніж за тиждень, понад 800 разів рятувальники виїжджали для ліквідації наслідків саме обстрілів.
Це з понеділка, я так розумію?
Це десь з суботи і по четвер. Якщо взяти, проаналізувати, то це от понад 800 разів. 29 людей врятували. Це не евакуація, це саме безпосередньо порятунок людей. 29 людей врятовано. Ліквідовано десь приблизно 120 пожеж, викликаних обстрілами. Величезне навантаження зараз відбувається на підрозділи ДСНС. Ви це бачите по таким містам, як Київ, Харків, Одеса, Полтавщина, Суми постійно.
Sumy is on the constant attack. One of the communities are attacked in particular by drones and the gliding bombs. The responders not only eliminate the consequences, but also are rescuing people. They are also putting the fires out and rescue people per se. Pyrotechnical units are also engaged over this period of time. More than 1,500 ammunitions have been disabled by this state emergency service. All people know what to do. The interaction of units is very well established, and we do it as fast as we can. We are talking today about the algorithms of our actions in terms of strikes and fires, what people should do before the first responders arrive. This is where every minute counts. Why is it important for us to know and raise public awareness on how to behave in the emergency situations? How does it help to rescue lives in these invaluable minutes and moments? Perhaps we should start with the basics. This is what I will say. Overall, the access of the vehicles of first responders and the maintenance of the residential areas and how people should respond, the algorithm and the knowledge what to do, improve and increase the process of rescuing lives. But we should know that a lot of things should be done in advance. I'm talking about safety measures. These safety measures must be maintained in the buildings and in the contiguous territories. With the emergency situations growing, we've seen so many residential buildings being attacked. This is the issue where we can find the ways to behave in advance. When we talk about residential buildings, the tenants and those managing companies must maintain and live up to the fire safety measures. One is the routes of access to these territories. There must be no rubbish on the floors. There must be no clogging. The entrance doors to the building must not be locked. We should also not block the waterworks of the safety main lines and the water supply. We also must act very quickly when we see some dysfunctionings in the electrical system. The evacuation doors is another issue. Sometimes they're just put away, and it means that both smoke and fire are spreading very fast, increasing the risk of poisoning and wounding people. And also it prevents the first responders from acting very professionally. These rules must be lived up to always. When we talk about the residential areas in general, now I'm talking about parking spaces in the territories that are adjacent to the buildings. The number of cars are growing constantly year in, year out, and the issue of parking is not solved very fast. So blocking these adjacent territories with cars and those checkpoints that have been put there in breach of the laws, it all affects the quality and the speed of rescuing people. All these issues must be solved in time. And of course, when the emergency situation emerges, we should ensure that people know what to do. The State Emergency Service currently enjoys a limited way of leveraging this situation. There is a moratorium imposed on all the checking processes. However, we are engaged in public awareness, what to do in the critical situations. Some people who are engaged in breaking the laws are held accountable, and we inform the property managers what to do and how to behave properly. We also talk to people. For example, today's event is targeting the goal to increase the awareness. We all know about a high-profile and a very sad incident when the rescuers could not get to the place that had been struck, and there was a woman who died as the result. If there is no access routes, you can't do anything. Do you see any legal initiatives to put the record straight, not to block the access routes? Currently, and I have mentioned this, the blocking of ways. One thing that we should refer to is the area of responsibility. Of course, one thing is the responsibility of the owners of the cars, the responsibility of the residents, the organization of parking places, oversight, and making sure that there are no blocks on the way of the rescuers. This is all area of responsibility of maintaining managers and the local authorities, so that the fire safety rules are maintained. According to the areas of responsibility, there is an issue of administrative liability when people are fined from 1,000 to 1,500 hryvnias. As for the officers, the fines are up to 5,000 hryvnias. The State Emergency Service sometimes tries to hold people accountable, but in the majority of cases, we are organizing different events to prevent such cases as you have mentioned. For us, the issue is that we discuss these issues and put them on the agenda for the regional and local authorities. We want people to be aware of their responsibilities. These issues are also discussed at the level of the task forces at the level of local government bodies. And also we talk to the military administrations at the regional level. In such a way, we are trying to affect the situation. In the majority of cases, all the breaches are being removed, but unfortunately, we see that people are very much ignorant of the fact that they should also take care of themselves and of their safety, and as a consequence, we see that sometimes responders cannot help people. We are not talking about post-fact, when there is a fatality, when the first responders are on their way and there are cars preventing them from accessing the area. It's a matter of life and death at the end of the day. And I think this is a matter of legislation to allow first responders, to damage the cars that are standing in their way. Legally, all the issues have been regulated in terms of what to do by the persons and what to do by the local governments, and what the communal facilities should behave in such situations. Of course, first responders know how their activities are legislated. The matter is how to live up to those laws. This is the heart of the issue. So the question is always discussed. The State Emergency Service is trying to put those things on the agenda and to control the ways how those rules are lived up to. But it's a matter of responsibility of specific physical persons, and the local government and the property managers in whose territory these breaches are taking place. It's a matter of impunity and responsibility. Water supply and fire hydrants, who should maintain them? Who should, in general, be responsible for their functioning? The water supply is an important issue in general as far as the first responders are concerned. Once the fire hydrants are effective, it all will affect how timely the help will be aided and how fast the fire is put out. When we talk about fire hydrants in the territories of some properties or enterprises, it's a matter of responsibility of the manager of such an organization. The whole system of fire hydrants in the territory of a settlement or along the public routes, this is an area of responsibility of local facility providers and local governments. Consequently, the maintenance is the area of responsibility of these officers, the government authorities. Of course, there are a lot of pieces of legislation that are broken by the physical persons when the fire hydrants are blocked by privately owned cars. The first response vehicles are showing up and there is no access to the hydrants. Then this car should be evacuated. There are a plethora of such cases, and perhaps both the managing organizations are also failing here, because there are no signs that this is the place where the fire hydrant is located under the asphalt layer. People wouldn't know about that. And sometimes people would ignore all the signs, and such are at risk by themselves and by their neighbors. And that is by the fact that first responders cannot aid them very fast. Let us talk about personal responsibility areas, and part of that is, of course, fire extinguishers. How important is it that every household has a fire extinguisher? Our service recommends that every household has at least one fire extinguisher. This will help to at least deal with the fire, which is of a lesser scope. Of course, if there is a major fire, a fire extinguisher will not help you out. You should call the first responders service. We recommend that in your flats, you should take advantage of the powder and gas extinguishers. They're easy to operate, and you've got all the information on our website. The recommendations are also indicated on the fire extinguishers themselves. The only thing that we recommend is to purchase the initial means of fire extinguishing from those suppliers who are professionally certified to sell such goods. This is very important. The State Emergency Service also recommends at least once to try to use the fire extinguishers before anything bad happens. This is important for children to see how their parents are getting prepared, and it's good for parents to understand how to do it practically. If a fire does happen, what is the algorithm of your actions? What a person should do first, how to understand when a fire extinguisher should be taken advantage of, or rather, call the first responders. Let us first talk about the responsibilities of an average citizen. The responsibilities here are different from those that are imposed upon the local governments. First thing you should do is to phone 101 to say your specific address, whether there is a fire and whether there are people affected, and also tell us your name, your last name, and your specifically identified address. And then, of course, your telephone number matters, because sometimes you will be contacted by the first responders. Then you should take care of evacuating people next to you and helping them if they need. For example, the elders that must be helped. If there are people who are in need of first medical aid, otherwise you are criminally liable. That far. After that, if situation allows, you should engage in putting the fire out with the help of the initial means of firefighting. This is where the fire extinguishers will be of help. But very important thing is that you should start putting the fire out if you are not endangered, if your health is not in danger. If the temperature is too high, if there is a lot of smoke in the area, you are not supposed to start putting the fire out. In such a situation, you should wait for the first responders, helping them with the information where the fire is taking place and to help them in any way possible. These are the responsibilities of citizens. As for the government officers, here, the algorithm coincides in a way with what I have said. One thing you should do is to know that the first responders have been contacted and even double check on that. If you are a responsible person, you should do everything possible to put people in the safety and to remove all the people who are onlookers and are trying to get back to collect their belongings, the responsible officers must organize safety measures for the people who are looking on or are trying to help in what they think is help. And then you have to wait for the first responders to provide the rescue workers with all the comprehensive information available to you to tell them where the hydrants are. Prior to that, perhaps you should evacuate privately owned cars that might be blocking the way, the routes of the vehicles. This will increase the chance of providing a high-quality operation. You should also stay near the officer who is in charge of the operation. Sometimes the gas must be discharged. This is what the responsibility of the maintaining companies are. Because of the enemy strikes, we've seen how buildings are falling apart. If there is a building that has been suffered, how do you behave? How do you help others? Perhaps I will take the floor here. I have a presentation here. You see, people should be very clear who have found themselves in a difficult situation under the debris. They should be aware that first responders are on their way. Depending on the situation, it'll take a few minutes, up till 9 minutes in major cities. Of course, in the rural areas, the time is a little bit longer. But people should be aware and not be panic-stricken. They should be aware that the situation is under control. If a person finds himself under the collapsed building, you should see around what the situation around you. If there is a possibility, you can start in a very slow way to take away those debris. When the first responders arrive, they start with the situational awareness. They are trying to get as much information as possible. We also contact the national police, and we set up a staff for the emergency situation to be aware of how many people might have been affected. You might have seen that at the initial stages, the heavy vehicles are not engaged. And why is that? Because we know that there may be people under the collapsed building. You see how the first responders use different mechanisms or are clearing the debris manually because of the fact that there might be people. After that, engineering vehicles are engaged to remove bigger materials. The next thing is you are not supposed to use matches or lighters. Why? Because there is a threat of gas situation. Once you light up a lighter, it might cause a gas blast. The rescuers always set up a minute of silence. What is it? It's a time that we take to know whether there are people under the debris. We also have devices that are engaged to catch the sounds under the debris. We are using these devices when we listen to whether there are signs of people under the debris. At that point, people must be screaming out and crying out as loud as they can. If there are different metal constructions, you should strike them to make any sound you can. to make sure that we know, the rescuers know, that there are people. We also engage our dogs, where dogs can sniff and show us that there are people under the debris. But once you can give a signal and cry out, if you have a telephone available, you should call. We've seen such situations where people had the access to the mobile connection, and they, over the telephone lines, told that I'm here and I'm waiting for the help. If there are no such availabilities, you should make sure that you are heard. Another point is that you should assess your physical condition. If you are wounded, if you are bleeding, you can use your clothes to plaster the wound that you are suffering from. And also, you should not be frozen. You should do what you can to rub your skin, or if you can, to move. We have put together short pieces of advice here. They are all available on the site of the State Emergency Service. There's nothing extraordinary here. We've got an ABC of safety. You will read there not only what to do once you have found yourself under the debris, but how to behave in every possible emergency situation. This is the situation in general. If a person is under the debris and he or she sees some way out, is it that it makes sense whether you should try or wait for the first responders? You should be very aware of the situation to see if the construction is not collapsible. If you see that the materials above you are fragile, you should not be moving. If there is a possibility to move and the beams above you or below you are stable, you can start moving. This is a situation that does not foresee a given answer. Once you see that the construction where you are in is not stable, you should start crying out and shouting out. Once you know that you are more or less safe and you can clear the debris around you, you can start trying, but you should do that very carefully and keeping track of the beams and girders around you. An advice for a leader, the head of the family or the head of the property managing organization, how to overcome the panic, which will be there, of course, the neighbors, you yourself, how people should be organized in order not to prevent the rescuers, but rather helping them. I will comment on that. The thing is quite simple. First thing to do is this: rescue job is for the professional rescuers. If on site there are no leaders of the property managing organization of this residential building, you should count on the people who are specially trained. People in all these organizations are there. This is the person that you should look up to because they have been trained. They know the algorithms of actions. These people are able to set up the process of rescuing, of providing help, of engaging all the necessary rescue services in taking care of the safety of water and gas supplies. So you should look to these specially trained people. If there is a possibility for a father, a head of the family, or any member of the family to rescue those people who are under threat, then you should do it. If there is a complex rescue situation where flats are blocked, you should turn to the managers of the property organization and to inform the first responders and wait for their arrival, not to exacerbate the situation. In psychological terms, what we are talking about here is to show your leadership and your very organized steps and your commands. You stay here, and since there is a lot of smoke around, everyone should now head to the balcony. And this is the way to evacuate. When we talk about a family, a father or a mother, where mother is the leader and the authority, she must very carefully and responsibly act. People must read our recommendations, and children should be brought up in a situation where they know if the building is struck, we gather at this place. We should take with us the first need bag. And since the beginning of the war, we've been talking about the necessity to have a special case where you have your documents, money, medicines, and some food, at least that will last you for 72 hours. And of course, medicines, if you have a condition, you should take care of that as well. Hygiene goods, somebody must take along this bag. Everyone should be aware where the nearest bomb shelter is. In the application gear, you know all the specific localities and the distance that separates you from that bomb shelter. And the command is this: we gather at this point, and we go along this way, and we should find ourselves at the end of this particular corridor. So we have to have people who are able to give clear-cut commands. There is nothing complex about this. You should train it once or two times, where children know that they are following the elders. If there are disabled persons, they should be taken care of as well. Nothing, it's not a rocket science, but it is a matter of organization. It's a matter where you should not be sloppy, you should be acting very fast and very clear. Thank you very much. We've been talking about the safety of civilians under the strike. The media center will resume our work on Monday. Keep track of our announcer. Thank you for staying with us.